Welcome, listeners. You are tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and with Corey.
Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality, and we broadcast every Tuesday from 7 to 8 o'clock Pacific time on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation. And you can actually watch us as we record the show on our Facebook group, which is called Awaken Your Psychic Abilities, and on my YouTube channel, which is just Dr. Leslie Phillips on YouTube. If you're new to the show, I should introduce the show to you. Unlocking the Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And we've been doing the show for about 6 years. And so there are hundreds of past podcast episodes that you can catch on most of the main podcasting platforms and my website, drlesliephillips.com.
Leslie, can you start over very quickly? I forgot to record.
Okay, everyone. we just had a recording snafu, so we shall begin the show again. Welcome, listeners. You are tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and with Corey.
Hello, everybody. Again.
Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality, and we broadcast every Tuesday from 7 to 8 Pacific time from CIVL on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation. You can also catch us when we are recording the show on our Facebook group called Awaken Your Psychic Abilities and on my Leslie Phillips YouTube channel. And we've been doing the show for about 6 years, so there's hundreds of past podcast episodes that you can catch on all of the main podcasting platforms, as well as by going to my website, drlesliephillips.com. Well, every week we have a different discussion topic, and it's always under the general umbrella of metaphysics and spirituality. And so this week is no exception. We are going to talk about a popular topic, which is mediumship.
Why is it popular, Dr. Leslie?
I'm not too sure why. All I know is every time I've ever done a mediumship workshop, it gets a lot of people. And I think it's probably because it's very human. We all know somebody who has passed away. And so, mediumship is is something that can help you connect with and communicate with your loved ones who are on the other side. And also sometimes people really want to communicate with their pets. So loved ones includes family and friends and pets. And so I think that that's what it is, that people are, when they're separated from their loved ones, they really want to reconnect. And mostly they want to know, is their loved one all right? That's probably the biggest question I get from people who are wanting to tune into someone they know on the other side. Is this person all right? And invariably, my answer is yes, they are, because they are no longer bound by the limits and challenges that they had when they were in the body. And in actual fact, the ones who really tend to be more disturbed are the people left behind, because they are having to deal with their grief and the loss and even some loneliness as a result of their loved one passing away. So mediumship is a practice of connecting with loved ones who have passed over to the other side, or indeed anybody. I mean, there are some mediums who communicate with famous people, and so there's no reason why you couldn't talk to Elvis Presley or Prince or an actor that you liked, for example, or some kind of historical figure. So it's in and of itself, it's not exactly a psychic ability, because different mediums work in different ways. So some mediums use their clairvoyance. And when a medium uses their clairvoyance, they're able to see images. And often what will happen is that the deceased loved one who wants to come through, who wants to talk to their relative, for example, will show the medium an image of what they looked like when they were alive. And so that's what's happening when you get a medium saying, I'm seeing somebody and they were about 6 feet tall and a heavy build and they had a mustache, for example. They are using their clairvoyance to see a projected image that's being communicated to them from spirit, so that they can make a connection with somebody in the audience, for example, if they're doing it on stage. So a medium can use their clairvoyance to see as spirit, to be able to see different images and to communicate with the person on the other side through the language of images and symbol. A medium could be talking to the people on the other side in a different way than that, though. So sometimes the medium might say, well, I'm hearing that. And in that case, they are using their clairaudience, their ability to hear as spirit, in order to communicate with the person on the other side. And another way is they might just simply know, and in which case they're using their knowingness or their claircognizance. So there are many different ways that a medium can use their psychic abilities to communicate with loved ones on the other side. And from my perspective, some of them are energetically safer than perhaps others. So for example, sometimes the medium will actually feel the energy of the person who passed over. And they might feel the unpleasantness that that person went through when they died. So if the person died of a heart attack, then all of a sudden the medium is feeling a tightness in their chest and a pain down their arm. Or if they broke their leg or their hip, the medium is literally feeling that pain. And in that case, the medium is channeling the energy and information through their own system. And so from my perspective, that's not a necessary way to communicate to spirit. You can kind of keep your distance and be able to talk through images and verbal cues, as opposed to actually bringing the energy of that person into your space. All right, so what else can we tell you about mediumship?
So just out of curiosity, you said last week that mediumship isn't in your book. How come it's not in the book?
For the reason I just said. It actually is in the book. There's a chapter in the book about myth busting. So what are some commonly held beliefs about being psychic that I have a different perspective on? And so I talk about mediumship in the context that often people think that mediumship in itself is a psychic ability, when actually it's not. It is a process of communicating with the dead and departed, but you can be using any number of different psychic abilities to do that communication. There is a chapter where we talk about trance mediumship. And trance mediumship, again, from my perspective, I might describe that differently than mediumship. Mediumship's commonly used to talk about the practice of communicating with people who've passed over. Trance mediumship relates to channeling spirit. And really, everybody is a trance medium because everybody is spirit and everybody needs to channel their own energy into their own body. And so, I mean, it's possible to use trance mediumship to connect with somebody on the other side, in which case you would be channeling their energy through your system, or even allowing them to possess you and talk through you. So, so trance mediumship is a genuine psychic ability, relates to the crown chakra and the ability to channel spiritual energy through the physical system. Mediumship is a practice of communicating with the dead that can draw on many different psychic abilities, one or more used together, actually.
So how common actually do you think mediumship is? I know you said everybody can do trance mediumship because we're channeling our spirit through our body, but mediumship, how common is that? How, like, what the people that you speak to on a regular basis, how many of them actually can communicate or have communicated with the other side?
So I think I would maybe ask the question in a slightly different way, in that everyone that comes to me who wants to learn about their psychic abilities, or who takes one of my classes, has psychic abilities that would enable them to communicate with people who have passed over if they want to. So everybody's got psychic abilities, and the question is, how do you want to use your psychic abilities? And so some people might want to use them to be an animal communicator. Some people might want to use them to be a healer, or to do readings. And then within doing readings, they might prefer to look at past lives versus talking to dead people. So I would say that, I occasionally meet students who want to develop their psychic abilities to do mediumship. But more than that, most of my students are really just wanting to develop themselves and expand themselves and experience themselves as spirit. I think that if you look out there in the world at practicing psychics, many of them would describe themselves as being a medium. It's a really popular way for psychics to describe themselves. And also it's very popular in terms of the general population has a need for mediums. So, I would think that that is one of the ways that the general public are more open to being interested in or talking to a psychic, if that psychic is a medium and can communicate with somebody that they know on the other side, and in a way have it proven to them. Because if the medium is able to say something specific about the person that they're talking to, then that person feels valid, like can validate that it's a real thing. I kind of teach my students, you don't really need to prove it to anybody. So yeah, I think mediumship is popular out there in the general public. It's a way that they perhaps understand what being psychic is, but being psychic is so much more than that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think when people think psychic, they think of two things. They think of telling the future, and they think of contacting ghosts, contacting spirits.
Yeah.
So those two things I think are very common in the public's concept of psychic abilities. And I know that even Hollywood Hollywood catches on to those two crazes as well, very much so, other than the other, intuition gifts, intuitive
Yeah.
gifts.
Yeah, and funnily enough, being able to talk to ghosts or spirits, or being able to talk to ghosts or spirits, isn't a psychic ability in its own right. Like I was saying before, you can talk to spirit through your clairvoyance by communicating through pictures, through your clairaudience by being able to hear and transmit verbal information, through your knowingness, even through telepathy and other ways. Predicting the future is a psychic ability called precognition.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a whole show on precognition not so long ago. And again, there's many misconceptions about precognition because, I mean, really, all we can do to give someone future information is that we're looking into the quantum field. We're looking into this huge probability field. And based on the energy as it is right here, right now, making our best prediction of which probable future that person is headed for. And they could make a change in their energy 5 minutes later, and it will change the future projection.
So, just out of curiosity, is there a difference between me sitting here and focusing on contacting spirit, or someone just sitting here and all of a sudden the spirit appearing?
That's a good question, Corey. I mean, really, it's just a matter of communication, and communication is a two-way street, isn't it? So I can start a conversation with you, or you can start a conversation with me, and then we're in conversation. So I would just think about it that way, that if you're sitting there and you're focusing on wanting to talk to someone on the other side, then you're starting the conversation. If you're sitting there and someone on the other side suddenly appears to you or makes themselves known, they're starting the conversation. Always you've got free will, whether to participate in the conversation. So this is another thing. Often people will who are starting to have experiences where spirit is communicating with them, think they don't have a choice, that somehow they're under obligation to listen to what that spirit says, or even what that spirit wants them to do. And I would say, absolutely, you are not under any obligation whatsoever. Just like if a stranger came up to you in the street and said, here's a letter, will you take it to my mother? She lives the other side of town. You'd be like, no, sorry, I don't know you. I'm not going to do that. So I think people forget that you always have your own free will, and it's always a choice whether you wish to communicate with a spirit that's wanting to start a conversation with you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now it's time for a break.
Listeners, you've been tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth, Dr. Leslie and Corey, and we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey. And tonight's tonight's episode is about mediumship, which is a process for communicating with people on the other side. And I'd be interested to hear whether any of our listeners have had experiences where spirit has come to talk to them. I'll also, by the way, just add at this point that they don't necessarily need to be passed away to communicate with you. We had an experience recently where somebody we knew was in an accident, and we both saw that person wandering around our house, and they're still alive, but they went through a kind of a traumatic experience, and so they were, I mean, I guess out in their astral body. Sometimes when you see a ghost, you're seeing the astral body of somebody.
That's interesting. I've heard of that. I've heard of that several times, where somebody is talking to someone or communicating with somebody and then find out that that person wasn't there. You know, they were, and then I think they're imagining it. I think it's hallucinogenic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that in a way that's a whole other show, but that's called bilocation. And all of the great spiritual masters were able to energize their astral bodies sufficiently that they could be seen and communicated with, and operate their physical body and their astral body at the same time. So that's why you could hear stories of somebody like Jesus teaching in the Middle East and also appearing simultaneously in India or somewhere.
I think we should. I think we should do a show. I think we should do a show on astral travel, but go into it a little bit more. Now, maybe have an experience of astral travel. Can we do that while we're on the show, do you think?
I guess we could. I don't know.
That?
Well, I just, I'm planning a course to teach people how to astral travel, and there's basically two ways of doing it. One is to train yourself to become lucid when you're asleep, which we couldn't demonstrate on the show, and the other is to consciously learn how to step your astral body out of your physical body and move your consciousness into it. And that's a little bit advanced to do on a radio show, but I suppose we could do a journey, kind of like a journey style meditation.
Okay, so I have a question from Shannon.
Yeah.
Shannon says, this happened to me the other day during a Reiki session. A door popped into my vision and an outline of a man. What do you do next to receive messages from them? Good question, Shannon. Thank you.
Right. Well, I mean, were you giving a Reiki to somebody else? Because you probably want to finish your healing.
Excuse me. Hang on. Come back later.
But well, so you can communicate telepathically with that being, and so you could ask them telepathically, what do they want, and then, if you saw the man, see what he does next, see if or listen to see if he talks back to you. A lot can be communicated through pictures and through images and through what they do, for example. And so I would say, if you decided you wanted to talk to him, then talk to him. Talk to him in your mind, talk to him telepathically, and then wait to see what happens. It's no different than talking to another human, in a way. You just have to get used to tuning into the more subtle psychic senses.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, folks, by all means, write it up. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on topic, but just about anything in the realm would be great.
Yeah, that's right. You can ask about your psychic abilities. You can even ask a question that you would like to have an answer for. Or you can ask a question that you've always wondered about mediumship. I think, I'll talk a little bit more about mediumship. I think often the way that people are professionally trained to be mediums, then they're trained to be receivers. And so they wait for somebody to drop in, and then they search for a connection for that person that's dropped in with the audience that they're working with. But it's equally possible to home in on a person and specifically look for a specific person that relates to that one. So if somebody comes to you, for example, wanting to talk to a specific person, then you can psychically put your antenna up and go looking for that person as spirit. And then when you locate them, have a conversation with them. You don't have to wait for them to show up. You can go find them. And it's just kind of like having an energetic radar, really, looking for the energy signature of that being, and then communicate with them telepathically. And also observe what is happening in their reality. Because like I said, the most common question like that I get is, are they okay? And the most common answer I give is, yes, they are. But, sometimes they will be, maybe their energy will still be more focused on the life that they've left. Sometimes maybe their energy has pulled away and they're focused on another life that they're creating, or they're focused on something else as spirit, in some kind of a process or learning or education as spirit, preparing them for then when they may come back into another body. But what's always true is that they're okay. The only exception would be when we pass over, we will often experience a time where we create a projected reality based on our beliefs. So depending on what beliefs we've held in a particular lifetime, when we pass over, we'll prove that that's true to ourselves. But really all that's happening is we're projecting that experience. And so let's take an extreme example. If somebody believes in hell and damnation, and they believe that they've been a very bad person, they might create the experience of hell temporarily on the other side until their spirit guides can get through to them and rescue them and help them move out of that state of consciousness. But anytime anyone is experiencing that, it's illusory. They've created a fantasy experience based on their beliefs.
Interesting. So we have a question from Fran. And Fran says, when our family moved into a new house, I saw my deceased grandparents in our family room through the window when I was outside. This experience is what started me on my spiritual journey.
Very cool. Yes, that's a good point, isn't it? Because I think very often what is happening is that the family member who's passed over wants to tell everybody, you don't need to worry. It's great here. We don't die at all. We just move into another form of consciousness. And so they can prompt people who've not really thought about that into exploring more deeply the world of spirit and psychic abilities. And yeah, I mean, that's great, isn't it? Because if that's the first time something happens to you, how did you see that? What was really happening? Very cool. Thank you for sharing, Fran.
So in relation to that, a lot of people, when they see spirit, they see a spirit. But in this case, Fran saw two. So how common is it to be able to see two spirits or three or four or more? And how does that happen as opposed to just seeing one spirit? Like, how does that, like, do they get together and say, let's go visit Corey today? Or
it's very common. It's very, very common to see multiple spirits. And I would say it's only as limited as you are in your belief system. So, for example, in my classes, we tend more to work with spirit guides than deceased loved ones. But sometimes people can have deceased loved ones who come in as their spirit guide. And, we're often working with multiple spirit guides at the same time. I'm sometimes aware of huge crowds of beings as spirit who are helping and working with me. So it's very common. And how does that happen? So we think in a very linear way because we exist in time and space, but they're outside of time and space. And so they would come together more on a synchronicity, really, an event that they're all interested in, a happening that's something that they're all interested in experiencing or participating in. So for example, if you're doing a healing, I might have my main healing guide, and sometimes I might call in other beings that want to help in the healing. And so they come together based on a common interest.
So Michael says, ghosts talk to me in dreams. They bring me to the place where they died or show me what happened in the past. Is this a psychic ability he wants to know as well?
Well, so when you're dreaming, you are astral traveling. So you are traveling in your astral body, outside your physical body, and experiencing yourself in the astral plane reality. And again, that's also outside of time and space. And so you are meeting up with these different souls and interacting with them. So I would say astral travel is a psychic ability. Out-of-body experience is a kind of psychic ability. Yes. And there's so many. We're doing is we are entering a huge playground, a bigger playground of activity than we have when we're in our physical body, because we're limited by time and space in the physical body. In the astral body, we're only limited by our imagination. And so it's very interesting that that's happening to you, and that's happening to you on a frequent basis. And there must be a reason for that. So you on a soul level may have some kind of interest or affinity, maybe for communicating with deceased people or helping them to move on in some way. I wonder why they would show. So he said they show where they died, show their grave.
No, not so. He says, show me what happened in the past.
Oh,
so,
what happened in the past? So almost like a life review.
Yeah,
this was
like
this was my life. These were events that happened in my life.
That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very interesting. And there is a kind of life review that happens when we pass over, that we're able to see and review all of the events and situations of our lives. And we're normally helped to do that by our spirit guides. So maybe you're a spirit guide in training.
So here's a question. We've all seen, I Talk to Dead People, the whatever that show was with Bruce Willis. Is it possible to be having conversations with someone and then find out later that that person wasn't alive and not actually know that while you're having that conversation?
So you mean you're seeing them as though they're in a body?
Yeah, like someone's sitting on the chair in my office having a chat with me, and I've had that experience with spirit, where I had three visitations, mom and dad and a baby, and they looked absolutely real and just moved across the room. And but I was very young, but it was quite interesting. But is it possible to? I know that I thought they were real.
Well, I was going to say there you have your answer, because you experienced it. And I think the fact that you were very young meant that when we're very young, we haven't shut down our psychic abilities to the degree that most of us done when we're older. So I think that you were probably more open, and that's how you were able to see them. I had a question from someone in my clairvoyance class today, who was asking about the quality of her psychic vision, and she was saying, well, shouldn't it be as clear as it is when I look through my physical eyes, and why isn't it? And it can be as clear as when you look through your physical eyes, but most of the time it's not. And why? Because we're in the body and we've got all of the body's intellect and body's energies acting as a filter that comes between us and being able to see so clearly. But when we're little, we don't have the same filters. We don't have the same accumulation of stuff in our system, and we don't have the disbelief either. So I would say that your experience was valid and genuine and true. And you were able to have it because you hadn't, you were still very open.
Okay, so it's time for another break, it seems.
All right, listeners, we'll be back after these messages. Welcome back, listeners, to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey.
Hello.
Tonight's topic for Unlocking Your Truth is mediumship. And we've been having a delightful discussion all about mediumship. And thank you for the listeners who have sent in a question about it. And usually in the final part of the show, we do really love to open up for our listeners' questions. And so we invite you to post your questions in the Facebook group or on the YouTube channel. And they can be questions about mediumship, but they can also be things you've wondered about, or even, if you need a little psychic look at something, we'd be happy to do that for you on the show.
By the way, Michael or Havana, who said, had a last question there, said, though it's happened, it's not frequent that it happens to him, but when he opens up to it, it does happen. So
yeah,
very interesting. So I have a question.
Sure.
Are there areas that you can go to that would open up the mediumship more than if you were sitting somewhere at home? Or are there places that you can go to? God, you hear about portals, like different types of portals and things like that people talk about.
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the first thing I want to say in answering it is you can open up your psychic abilities wherever you are on the planet. So they reside within you, and the magic isn't in a special place that you can go to. That said, yes, there are energy hotspots on the planet where it can amplify your abilities, or maybe the veil is thinner and it's easier to tune in. So there are all sorts of different energies on the planet in different locations, So I would imagine if, for example, if you were on a granite mountaintop, all that granite crystal would probably act as an amplifier, for example. And so yes, there are places that you could go where you could have an amplified experience or a clearer experience, but I wouldn't want people to think that that's the only way that they can do it. The other example, by the way, is crop circles. People very often have quite interesting psychic experiences inside a crop circle. But yeah, there are energy vortexes and on the planet. For example, Mount Shasta or Uluru or Glastonbury or any number of places where there's a special kind of energy that can help you move more easily into those spaces and experiences. Thank you for that question, Corey.
Yeah, what about ley lines?
Yeah.
So ley lines just physical energy?
I don't think they're just physical energy. It's the energy grid of the earth. So there are different energy grids that exist in our world. There's the human consciousness grid, and there are different energy grids on the planet. And so the ley lines are lines of energy on the planet. I'm not sure how they would affect your psychic abilities. I think that perhaps often those kinds of energy lines are used by animals in their migrations.
It's more earth energy than it is psychic in that sense, I would presume.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have another message from a question from Michael, and Michael says, I saw also a heavenly portal. It's so beautiful, white light with a heavenly hymns, songs on it. Once you see it, you don't want to be back on earth. It's so beautiful. Don't go to the light, Michael. Don't go to the light.
Yes, that sounds like you were listening to some angelic music. That it's called the music of the spheres, the beautiful angelic music on the other side, in the higher frequencies of vibration. Thank you for sharing that.
I have a question from Shannon.
Yeah.
Question from Shannon. Shannon says, is there a way to manifest quicker with your spirit guides or tap into your abilities to manifest, for example, wealth?
Yeah. Actually, I'm teaching a manifestation course at the moment, and it's a 10-week course, and we go in great depth about how to do that. The basic principles is to do with managing your own vibration, because you have to be able to receive what it is that you're asking for. And so most in the course, I get the students to keep an emotional diary for a week, a thought diary for a week. So you get to observe, where are you holding your vibration? How much are you feeling negative emotions and thinking negative thoughts? And then we look at the beliefs and the belief systems, and gradually tease out over time the patterns that you hold within your energy that keep what you're wanting to manifest away from you. Because if you have a belief, I'm unworthy, or good things don't happen to people like me, then that's going to keep what you're wanting to create away from you. And at the very least, it's going to slow it down. If you're doubting in any way, that's going to slow it down. So the first thing that you need to do is clean up your own energy vibration. And then beyond that, there are lots of amazing manifestation techniques that you can use that will work to amplify the energy and speed up when those things show up in your life. So the short answer is yes, and I gave you a bit of a longer explanation about how.
There's an example of that somebody gave me years and years ago, and they said there's a fella and he needs a job, so he goes through and looks at ads and finally gets an interview, and he goes on the interview and he's feeling really positive. And so he leaves the interview and he goes, I know I'm going to get this job. And he goes home and everybody asks him how the interview is. Oh, this is great. It's my job. It's perfect for me. I know it's exactly what I want. I'm going to get this job. This is fantastic. And the fellow was going to call him on the Friday, to let him know what the outcome was. And there it's like Tuesday, and then it's Wednesday, and he said, I'm going to get this job. This is my job. I know I'm going to get this job. And then Thursday rolls around. He's going, it's getting closer. Friday's coming. And like, I'm going to get this job. This is exciting. And then Friday comes around. The telephone rings. He picks it up. And the fellow says, sorry, but George, you didn't get this job. And George hangs up the phone and says, damn, I knew I wasn't going to get this job. And so when and you have to really, really, really examine yourself. And like you say, your belief system around these things, because it can be hiding way back in your subconscious where you don't see it. And even your subconscious is connected to your manifestation.
Yeah. One of my students in the current manifesting course managed, within halfway through the course, she'd manifested her ideal dream job. So that was a really big success story for doing all those things that I was talking about, you know, changing her emotional and mental habits and belief systems.
So we have a question from Letitia. Letitia says, can you see if I will be more in tune with my intuition, psychic, medium abilities within this next year?
That's up to you, Letitia. You create
Nothing like passing the buck, Dr. Leslie.
You create your reality. Well, it's funny, isn't it? I was explaining earlier, but you create your own reality. So that is not a thing that happens to you. It's a thing that emanates from you as a result of you. And so what I would say to you is, if you want your intuitive abilities and your mediumship abilities to be stronger in the next year, then you can make that happen through your intentions and through focusing on it. You know, this stuff takes practice. It takes experiencing it. You know, the classic example I always give is, if you decide you want to develop some muscles, you've got to go to the gym. You've got to work out. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So all the students in my classes get a lot of success. But while they're in my classes, they're meditating every day. They're cleaning their energy every day. And they are learning techniques to help guide them, and operating frameworks to operate through, in order to have experiences of their psychic abilities. So Letitia, you know, actually we're starting Unlock Your Intuition this week, and you're welcome to join. If you want to get a jump start onto that, contact me after the show if you're interested. But I've got a new group of students who are just this week beginning their journey to do exactly that.
Yeah, Michael's got back in touch with us, or I should say Havana's got back in touch with us, the same question. I think he's the fellow or person that was just talking about going into the light. He says, yeah, I'm about to go in, but somebody has stopped me from going in. I don't know who that was. It's so difficult to wake up. I saw my surroundings. I yelled out, but can't, just to say to them to wake me up. Thanks to my wife, she tapped me, seeing him. I'm in great ordeal waking up. He's this fellow's from the Philippines.
Oh, welcome. I wonder what time it is in the Philippines right now.
So what do you think about that?
All right. I'm not sure what the question is, but
well, he's just making a comment on we were talking about don't go into the light type thing, right?
Sometimes it can be hard to wake up if we're in a very deep experience. Sometimes you hear about people who, you know, they're trying to wake up and they can't move their body, and usually that is because they're still in their astral body and they've not quite moved back into their physical body. And sometimes in the out of body state, we go very far away, and we go so far away into some of the realms of experience wouldn't even make any sense to us from our waking point of our waking self. So I don't really know how to comment on that experience, except to say, yeah, it looks like you'd gone into that experience, and I'm glad your wife woke you up and brought you back.
By the way, he says it's Wednesday at 11:40 a.m.
In our tomorrow.
Yeah, he's already in the future.
Yeah.
We're talking to somebody in the future, Leslie.
In the future. Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. We have our own personal time machine here.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Let's look at, I have actually a lot of questions about mediumship. I mean, my mother was, my mother's quite psychic, and she used to know things before, well, as they happened, like death, especially with deaths and things like that. She was aware. But when my dad passed away, my mom was still alive, and she was telling me that, of course, she was angry. She was always angry with my father for one reason or another. But when he passed away, shortly after he passed away, he visited her, but in his coffin, and
Oh,
just sort of like appeared on the kitchen table. And my mother wasn't too pleased about that.
wow. Oh, that's a pretty strong visual, isn't it? I know
Yeah.
that. I mean, that's a common experience. When my grandfather passed away, my mum, she was making a cup of tea, and her tea bag burst. So she poured the tea in the sink, and then she looked in the sink, and the tea leaves had made the shape of an angel. And for some reason, in that moment, she was just like, "That's a message from my dad." And then her sister called, and he'd passed away. So all sorts of interesting things happen as messages when people pass away. My father there's like a family dream of losing a tooth. And when his mum passed away, he was on holiday and she hung on. And when they got back from their holiday, as soon as they walked through the door, I was waiting to tell him. And he said, "I know, it's my mum, isn't it?" And the reason he knew is he dreamt that he lost one of his teeth. And so he put two and two together, dreaming that losing his tooth means somebody's going to die. And he just intuitively knew who it was.
Hmm. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Interesting. I used to, the two, about 10 years ago, I was living in a place, and we had a captain. He was a captain in the house, and he walked the hallway in the house every once in a while. You could just catch him. Like, you could never see him directly on. You could only see him out of the corner of your eye. It was very interesting. He used to walk in front of these mirrors that we had up there, and in front of a closet. And even people that came to visit used to see him. It was very, very interesting. Never found out any history about the house, why that person would be there. But
Yeah, that's interesting as well, isn't it? I once lived in a house where there was a goblin type creature. And I just clear them out,
mhm.
I don't want them in my house. And then it turned out that the person I was living with at the time, that was his goblin.
Yeah.
He wanted it there, but I got rid of it.
Oops.
Yeah,
Oops. Stuff happens, I guess, eh?
don't know why you want your own pet goblin, but
I don't know.
there you go.
People are weird.
Well,
Some people are strange. I've had some interesting experiences. Well, I used to live on a cemetery, and when I was like between the age of 8 to 12 in Montreal with my parents, there was a house right in the middle of the cemetery. They actually had two homes, one on the Catholic cemetery and one on the Protestant cemetery. And we lived in the Protestant one, and it was right in the. I'm talking in the center. I mean, in the center of the like you're a 15-minute walk from the closest road,
wow.
city road. And my dad used to say,
Big cemetery then.
yeah, almost, yeah. Well, from our house, you couldn't see any of the gravestones or anything. It was a beautiful place to live in. But I remember my dad used to say, people would say, well, aren't you afraid? Because he used to go around at night every once in a while. He wasn't really the watchman, but he was the watchman. And he used to tell him, he says, I'm not afraid of the dead people, only the live ones. And he never had any stories about that, but I don't have any about there either. There's nothing there that I remember ever seeing or experiencing anything unusual with spirit. Well, no, one thing. I remember walking home with my parents one night from a park, and we used to like walk back through a certain way, and we were walking. All of a sudden, there was like about an 8-foot ball of light in front of us, just like this huge ball of light. It was the middle of the night, right? It was this huge ball of light that came, and it was there for about 5 seconds and then gone. Don't know what that was.
An alien visitation.
Could be.
Palladium in Merkaba.
Yeah, and it wasn't a light, you know, the shining onto the ground. It was actually a ball of light. Ball of light. Kind of cool. Kind of cool. Natasha says, I'm happy with my cat. No goblins, please. Oh.
Funny, isn't it? I mean, I've never thought of it before. You probably could have a spirit pet, couldn't you?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
You
Wouldn't
live
have
in
to
a
feed
building,
it or clean up
can't
after
have
it.
any proper pets.
Yeah, it can still knock over vases and things like that, though.
Maybe.
Well, it's time to go. We're a little over time, actually. So.
All right. Well, listeners, make sure you post on YouTube and on the Facebook group what topics you'd like us to cover. We're at the beginning of the year. We haven't planned our topics out for the rest of the year yet, so we would love your input. What would you like us to talk about? We'll take it into consideration.
We will.
Yes.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.